Welcome back to the studio. Today we're going to be painting some really cute sunflowers pieces. This is the 5x5 that I'm holding up here. Here's the 4x4 that I've added a cute hanger to. I think these would make really cute gifts. Of course, they're cut out on the laser, so they're on 1/4 inch birch. And then the laser engraves lightly the artwork onto the front, so they're ready for you to just have fun painting. The reference photo will be linked in the description. I love the reference photo for this one. The lighting is really so dramatic. I'm trying to show it without the glare. So be sure that you check the description of this video for all of the things that I offer you. There will be, of course, the color mix worksheet. That is wonderful to print out and add your color mixes to. It's a wonderful reference later if you're painting more of them for gifts or for your booth. So check all the description information. And of course, I hope that you'll subscribe to the channel. I have lots of new videos coming all of the time. So when you subscribe, you just get a little notice that I have a new video. So let's have fun and start painting. Let's get started painting our little sunflower here. This is the 4x4. On mine, I have some little marks where I'm going to drill. If you order this 4x4, this is basically 3/4 inch in from, oh, I don't think it's 3/4 inch. Maybe it's 3/8 inch. That sounds about right. About 3/8 inch. Just measure in, make yourself a little mark if you want to use these as a hanger, which is what I'll be doing with this one. I do have some colors out on my palette. I'm using the heavy body today. I have the Mars Black, Phthalo Blue, Burnt Sienna, Quinacridone Magenta, Pyrrole Red, Hansa Yellow Opaque, and then I've used a little bit of the phthalo and Hansa Yellow to mix up a green. So the first thing that I'm going to be doing is setting in the background for this piece. I'm also going to help myself out and make a few little marks where these petals come into the center. I didn't engrave those because I wanted there to be a little bit of freedom as you paint. So if you want to take a pencil or a chalk pastel or something to draw in these lines, if that will help you. Um, it's a tiny piece. So the challenge is getting in enough detail that you feel like you love the piece, but not so much detail that it's just too tedious. So there's lots of petals. We're going to give ourselves a little bit of wiggle room with this, but I think that I will put some marks in here just to help myself as I go forward. So let me get that all set up and then we'll get back to start painting in this background. I'm just going to be starting to paint in this background. I'm going to be a little bit meticulous, a little bit careful so I don't lose my engraved lines as I go. It's just going to make it, if I'm a little bit careful around these petals, then I won't have to be spending as much time when I come to painting the petals in. I won't have to try to cover up this dark that we're painting around. So it will take a little bit of time. It's I don't know, it's relaxing. I don't mind the fiddly part. If you are going to be using a lighter background for yours, you can certainly just paint over the whole thing, but yellow is so transparent. So even though this takes a little bit of time, I do find that in the long run, it saves me some time. I also do like to think about painting in the background sometimes as it's just a little bit of a warm up. You get a feel of the brush in your hand again. You get a feel of how the paint is acting today. So I don't mind taking a little bit of extra time. I did come in and use a pencil to just mark out the lines, finish out the lines where the engraver didn't engrave. I purposefully made this engrave for all of you um, without too many engrave lines. Just gives you a little bit of freedom to to paint without having to worry about where those engrave lines are. But when you're doing the sunflowers, it's nice to be able to see which petals go back behind a little bit easier. So if that will help you, you can certainly do that. Off to the side, I do have a little cup of my airbrush medium and a little cup of extender medium. Remember, the airbrush medium is just what I use to thin out my paint. I'm not a big fan of using water, not because I'm worried about water affecting the quality of the paint, but I just find that I get better results with the airbrush medium. So that's why I do that. If you like using water, certainly feel free to use water. If you're using the fluid acrylics, you won't need to thin yours out as much as these heavy body. I'm doing, oh, I just went over that leaf. It's hard to talk and paint. Um, I'm using the heavy body just because I'm getting ready for a show and I'm doing a lot of painting. So the heavy bodies just stay wet a little bit longer on my palette. So that's why I've chosen these. While I'm here, since I have some green mixed up, I'm just going to go ahead and cover over my little mistake there with a little bit of green, just so I don't goof up again later. What else did I want to point out? Oh, I was going to show you, I did finish painting another one. This is a 5x5 of the same design. I'll be having both of these available for you in the Shelley Parker Art website. So the 4x4 or the 5x5. Let me go ahead and hold that here for you. If you'd like to take a screenshot, you certainly can there. It might give you a little bit of a hint of where some of those shadows are going to go later. And let's see, was there anything else? Oh, I did clean the top of the wood cutout. So this is just a 1/4 inch wood panel that has the engrave on it. I actually have my signature on the back. It looks a little bit wet because I've cleaned it. But I have covered it with a coat of GAC 100. That just keeps the paint from soaking in too much to the surface and gives us a little bit of a barrier coat. Just make sure that there are no oils or anything like that over time that will come forward into our paint. So I'm just going to go ahead and paint this whole background. As soon as I get away from some of these little petals, I'll be moving to a larger brush. I'm using a little bit of a mixture, got a little bit of a glare on it. I'm using a mixture of the Mars Black and then a green that I mixed with the Phthalo Blue and the Hansa Yellow Opaque. So I'm just going to enjoy painting, just relax, really play some good music, and have fun getting this background in. I will fast forward this section to let you watch how it comes together. Okay, I have a nice base coat in. I lightened the camera just a little bit to try to give you a little bit of a sense of some of the variation of greens that I have going in the background. What I'm going for here is quite a bit darker along the edges of the sunflower and the leaves. This sunflower is um, really has an interesting, very dynamic lighting to it. And so I really want some of that dark right around the edges of the petals to really be able to capture some of that pop of light that we're going to put in. At this stage, I would let this dry completely. As it dries, you're going to get a better sense of where we need to come in and do another coat of dark right around the edges. I just like to make sure that it has a nice coverage at this stage. I prefer to do it now rather than come in around the petals once I have those painted. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I am going to be spending a little bit of time painting the edges as well, even though it's just a little 4x4 on a 1/4 inch birch. There is a little bit of an edge, so it's nice to have those sides painted as well. And the other thing that I wanted to be sure to bring up at this point is um, make sure, I really think that even if you are a beginner painter, that some kind of an extender medium will help you, particularly if you live in a climate where the air gets very, very dry. Um, it just, even just dipping into the extender medium to help keep my paintbrush from getting too gummed up with paint is a wonderful help as we're painting. So I'm going to pretty much let this dry. I'm going to paint the edges and then we'll come back and start painting the center of the sunflower and the first basin of the leaves. Okay, this has had a couple of hours to dry now. I hope that you can see some of those areas that I was talking about before where I just would need to come back in and redarken around a couple of areas. So I'm going to do that now. The camera is just having a really hard time picking up um, the dark colors here. Hopefully you can sort of pick it up, sort of see some of the greens in there. So I went back in, like I mentioned, and just darkened around some of the leaves, just really to just make sure I have really even coverage. And then came back in with some greens around the outside. I'm not sure if I mentioned before, but I will be linking the reference photo. It's a really cool photo. So I'll be linking that in this video's description so that you can take a look at it and see what I'm referencing as I'm painting. Um, I'll let this go ahead and dry for the background, and then I'll be coming in and adding some little sort of bokeh sparkles through, so that will be fun. While I have some of this dark, I think I will go ahead and just begin to indicate the center. Let me see if I can pull the, I'm so zoomed in because it's such a tiny piece. I'm going to pick up a little bit of the burnt sienna, just pretty much straight burnt sienna, and begin to just set that into the center. So very, very loosely. I think that that's one of the hardest things about a small piece. Many people would maybe look at the smalls and consider them easier than a big piece. I find that they take about as much time as the larger pieces to paint a 5 by 5. The 5 by 5 that I showed earlier, um, it takes about as much time as it took to paint um, the 10 by 10 hen that I did for the membership class. So, I know that the smalls sell better. Of course, they're a lower price point just because of their size, but I don't mind doing them. Um, in many of my classes, I talk about the fact that I really don't think about the time spent. I often see people talking about, how do you make sure you're being compensated for your time? Um, for me, art is my happy place. And so I'm getting the joy of the art just being in my studio doing it. So if somebody enjoys the piece and purchases it, then that's just a bonus. It's wonderful to sell the pieces. It's a nice way to get a little bit of the investment back from the supplies that we invest in. But I never think of painting as far as I'm going to get paid by the hour, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I know that that makes my husband crazy because he's a CPA and, um, everything is kind of how many of these can you make in an hour? But I think first and foremost, we should paint for the joy of it. Looks like it's maybe blurring out a little bit. Let me see if I can fix the focus. Okay, we'll try that. As I mentioned, sometimes what I see on the streaming software is not exactly what you see on the finished video, so it's all kind of a guess. So I just there mixed a little bit of the black with the burnt sienna, and I'm just going to loosely dot in a center. We're going to come back later. This is just giving us an idea of some color here. Help us to see the colors of the petals when we start to add those in. So mostly what I'm looking for here is just that it has some color variation. I can see some of the burnt sienna. I can see some of the darker brown. It ends up being a little bit of a burnt umber color by mixing in some of the black. I am using a little round here. This is a number 6 round from Princeton Select. I really like these little round brushes. All right, I think that that's good enough for that part. Let's go ahead and start to do our first look at some of the leaves. I think I'll mix up some greens and then I'll be back in a minute to let you know what I've mixed up. Still getting used to mixing on this little plate, but I am really liking the paper plate for my small pieces. It's just handy to grab. So I did invest. One of my favorite palette knives is the number Sheesh, I don't know. Is it a number 7? I think that this is a number 7 Liquitex Freestyle. This one is a number 17 that I just got this week, and it's perfect for mixing on the littler plate. So let's talk about what I have. Of course, I talked about earlier that I mixed the original green with just the phthalo blue and the Hansa yellow opaque. So that is our sort of medium green here. I darkened it a little bit. You can darken it with phthalo blue, burnt sienna, quinacridone magenta, kind of everything. So just a little bit darker than the original medium tone of green. Made an even darker tone because I'm going to want some of that really dark in the stalk of the sunflower. So just a little bit of this green pulled over, added a little bit more phthalo, added a little bit of red, a little bit of quinacridone magenta. You can add some burnt sienna, just making it darker. I took this green, pulled it over, added in quite a bit more yellow and some titanium white. I'm going to want a really sunny sort of a lime green on part of the leaves, so I'll be able to work from here. And then this is a little bit of a blue green. Some of these leaves have a really interesting blue shine to them, a kind of a blue green shine. So I've just mixed up a little bit of paint here. One of the things I want to mention is that I'm not going for the perfect color. I'm just trying to give myself some different values to work from. And then I can brush mix to change them as I'm painting. Um, you saw me put out a little bit more Hansa Yellow Opaque in that last fast forward. I did add in a little bit of the open medium. I like adding a little bit of open medium to my original 7 colors on the palette. It just gives me a little bit more working time. If you don't have open medium, you can certainly use an extender medium like I've talked about, or if your paint dries, just remix some colors and start again. That's fine too. Having a little mister bottle, sorry, while I reach, is really nice if your palette starts to feel, I'm so zoomed in, it's hard to see. Um, if your paint starts to feel like it's tacking up, give it a little spritz. When you get ready to quit for the day, give it a spritz, put the paper towel, sorry, the other paper plate on top, and put it in a Ziploc bag, and then it'll be ready when you come back to the studio. One of the things that I haven't liked, just as a side tip, one of the things I haven't liked about the paper plate is it just bounces around so much. I have found that having 4 or 5 different plates stacked together helps that a little bit. So let's go ahead and go through how I'm going to start to block in the first leaf, and then I'll probably show you just in a fast forward how the rest of the block in comes together. When I'm thinking about blocking in, I am already thinking about the some of the different darks and lights that are happening, but I'm not worried about getting it exactly right. I'm just trying to give myself a first look, because when we come back in with the next coats, it just gets easier and easier the more coats of paint we add to it. So let's go ahead and start on this leaf up here that I goofed up on earlier. And when I say goofed up, it's no big deal. I hope that you'll think about that too as you're painting. Don't get discouraged or upset if you paint the wrong thing or, don't get it exactly right. We can always add another layer and paint over it. So I just dipped into a little bit of the extender medium. I'm going to bring a little bit of white down, a little bit of this blue green that we mixed before. This is a teeny tiny little leaf. I'm going to go ahead and change to my round and see how I like that. I may end up switching back, but maybe the small round will give me a little bit more of an ability to get this point of this leaf up here. And this has been in my water, so I'm just trying to make sure that I don't have any drips that are going to come down the ferrule and rain on my piece here. For me, I have my reference photo on a screen that's just over here. So right in front of me, right there, I have the recording, the streaming screen. And then on a monitor over there, I have the reference photo. So I can easily look up and see the reference. If you have the ability to have your reference photo on a screen, whether it's your phone or a laptop or iPad, being able to see it on the screen is generally more helpful than if you printed out the reference photo. You're just going to be able to see more colors on on a screen. So I'm just generally looking for some of these different greens that are up here. Don't worry about the color being exactly right. This is just our first look. And because it's our first look, I think one of the important things to mention here is, um, oh, I lost my train of thought. I hate it when that happens. Do you guys ever do that? Just start to say something and go, oh, what was I going to say? I don't know. Oh, since it's our first look, one of the important things to remember here is keep the paint from having any brush strokes. I don't want to have ridges in this paint that I have to deal with later. So again, one of the challenges with painting small pieces is you just need the tiniest little bit of paint on your paintbrush. If you have too much paint on your paintbrush, it's going to be very, very difficult to um, manage it on your piece. And that can be a little difficult if you're used to painting large pieces. It's a little bit of a difficult transition to really think about not having too much paint in your brush. So I'm just looking at the reference picture, picking out some of the different colors that are happening in this leaf. That's pretty good for a first look there. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward as I set in some of the values for some of these other leaves, and then we'll talk about it some more. that's really good for that first look. A couple of things I wanted to talk about. It's important at this stage to not let yourself get too much into the details. And when I say details, I more mean like the outlines of the highlights around the stem and the leaves, the veining of the leaves. So what I'm trying to make myself look at are just the basic bigger shapes of the leaf or whatever that I'm painting. So I know that there's a strong highlight here, there's a strong highlight there. This leaf is very lime green, so I've hinted at that. There's a real strong highlight here. So this first look gives me a little bit of a road map, and I'm trying to not look at some of those finer details. One of the interesting things that did happen as I was mixing colors, it's a little bit difficult to see, but this part, this green here, mixed a little bit more purple than I intended for it to. So let me pull it over so that you can see. I mixed a little bit of a darker green. I'd had the dark green before. I wanted a little bit darker, so I brought in some Quin Magenta, brought in some Phthalo Blue to darken it even more. And it ended up leaning a little bit more quinacridone magenta, which made it more purple. As I put it on, originally I thought really wasn't the color I was going for, but then I thought I kind of like it. And the reason that I like it is because our sunflowers are going to be very yellow. Yellow and purple are complements. So this will be very, very pleasing to the eye. Let me go ahead and pull in the first one that I painted. So it doesn't really have that purple, and it's not that that's wrong. This is still very pretty, and I'll leave it as it is. But I bring it up so that as you're painting, you'll start to see some of those things happen and let them happen instead of trying to control it so much that you kind of undo something that happened that worked. I hope that that made sense. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mix an orange, and I know that this looks very orange. It's actually more red than it looks on the camera. I should probably now adjust the camera again. I tried to adjust it so you could see some of those green shifts happening. So I'll adjust it again so the colors are a little bit more true, but I'm going to mix a yellow and some of the naphthol red to make an orange. I'm going to pull some of that. I'm so sorry, excuse me. I'm going to pull some of that orange over to the side and add some burnt sienna to have a darker orange. These are going to be some of the shadows in the um, sunflower petals. So I'll mix that real quick, and then we'll paint a couple of petals. It's kind of getting toward the end of the day, so I don't know how much I'll get done, but let's paint a little bit more. Okay, let's talk about those colors. Like I mentioned, I mixed some Hansa yellow with the pyrrole red. I did try to adjust the colors so that you could see a little bit more clearly. The white paper plate is really bothering the camera, so I'll probably take this palette off to the side as I start to paint, just so that you get a better representation of the colors. Um, so a little bit of orange, pulled a little bit of that orange off to the side, added more burnt sienna. So you can see it's just a little bit darker. And again, I'll be able to adjust these colors as I go. I may need some more Hansa Yellow Opaque, but because it's so close to the end of the day, I'm going to leave it. You can see some of the little strings from the paint starting to kind of gum up. So that's what those are. You can also see that as I mix the colors, if you're using heavy body paints, you can scrape them up with a palette knife and then put them down in more of a pile. These thicker piles will stay, these thicker piles will stay a little bit workable longer. So I think that what I'll start to do, if my dogs won't be losing their minds upstairs. I don't know if that's my husband getting home. Okay, try that again. I'm going to pick up a very small filbert. This is a size 4. You could, of course, use a round. I may end up switching to a round. And I'm going to start to put in, oh my goodness. I'm going to start to put in some of the darker petals. So the petals that are more underneath. And again, these are teeny tiny petals, so really watch the amount of paint that you have in your brush. I am going to switch to a round. I'm going to grab the number 6 round from Princeton again. You could use a smaller one. This one comes to a pretty nice point, so we'll see how it goes here. Higgins just came back down and grunted as he laid down like he's so frustrated at whatever he was barking at. I'll probably say this quite a bit during this class, but because yellow is so opaque, I'm sorry, because yellow is so transparent, you might want to add, oh my goodness, you might want to add in more white than you think, and then come back in with the yellow at the end, because yellow placed over the titanium white will really glow. I'm going to paint for a little bit and let the dogs hopefully settle down, and then I'll explain more, hopefully, when there's not barking. Okay, probably as soon as I start talking, they're going to start barking again. But let's chat a little bit while I add in some of this color. You can see as I'm going through here that I'm not washing my brush, just letting those colors work together, particularly for this first basin. Um, you really don't need to worry about washing your brush. In fact, sometimes washing the brush too much is more of a frustration because you add so much water to your paint every time you go back to the palette. So I'm just setting in some of the shadow, coming back with some of the more of the yellow part of the sunflower petal and letting those work together. So by building the petals petal by petal, I can still have some wet paint to work with between those color variations. That allows me to run the brush through both of those colors to sort of pull them together. If you watch very many of my classes, you know that I don't like to talk about it being a blend because blending with acrylics, people get really frustrated with it really quickly. Think of it more as just pulling the colors together, softening the transition between one color to the next. I just picked up a little bit of that darker burnt sienna just to add a little variation to that petal. Again, I'm trying not to get too much into the details, but if something strikes me to do it, I do it. I don't like to get bogged down by art rules. You'll hear so many people say, you're not supposed to do that. Just paint, just have fun. Again, tiny little bits of paint in the brush. I really can't emphasize that enough. Um, and again, I'm speaking from experience because I know I've been working on some larger pieces, and it really is a transition to go down to the smaller pieces. But all of that brush hours, all the time we spend with the brush, so you just get so much better, better and better every time you sit down to paint. So I'm going to keep building these petals. Um, when you first sit down to do this, this might seem a little um, tedious. It might seem like it's taking forever. Just relax, have fun with it, enjoy the process. You're closer to being done than you think, really. Um, I'm always surprised when I start to think, oh, I've got so much to do. I really need to get this done. And then the next time I look at it, I'm like, oh, look, it's pretty much done. If you get the engraved art base that's available at Shelley Parker Art, please don't feel locked into any of these engraved lines. You can merge petals together, paint it however you like to paint. The engraved lines are really light enough that you can um, alter things as you go. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the class, there are so many ways that you could approach this. Gosh, this white is already getting tacky, all of my even with all of my helps. Um, there are so many ways that you can approach this. For me, for my eye and the way that I paint, this makes the most sense. And I find that if I build the petals this way, that I spend much less time coming back later to set in shadows. I just realized that this petal that I'm working on here actually goes behind the petal just to the right of it. So that's fine, it's no problem. I will just come back in and lighten this petal edge to bring it back forward again. A little bit too much paint in my brush, so I just wiped it out. And be careful, let me show you. My cloth that I have to the side has some green paint on it. I'm going to rotate it because that last time that I dipped over to wipe my brush off, I actually picked up some green from the little towel that I have. So here's that petal edge that I was talking about. I'm just going to relighten it. And one other thing I want to mention about these petals, even though we're building them piece by piece, petal by petal, don't think that all of them have to stand absolutely, um, I'm going to say proud of each other. I hope that that makes sense. Don't think that they can't run together a little bit, be very, very close to the same value to the neighboring petal. It's fine because um, as we look at sunflowers, our eye just naturally sees the overall shape. So I am trying to build some shadows, but I'm not worried if they look somewhat similar. And we're going to be coming back in later with more highlights too. So don't try not to be too literal with making the petals stand apart from each other. All right. I think that that gives you a good idea. I'm just going to keep painting some petals. I might not finish these this evening. If not, there'll be a little bit more fast forward of petals tomorrow. Trying to get the camera to pick up how pretty these are. Um, yeah, that's really, really good. That's about an hour and a half-ish of painting where I finished the background, came in and did the first base coat of the leaves, and then the first coat of the sunflower. Everything from here is a lot of fun, um, but pretty quick. So in just a couple of hours, really, you can have really pretty small pieces to sell. Um, yeah, I hope it's going to show up better on the final version than what I see on the monitor here. Let's see what else was so I probably tomorrow. I hope I can tomorrow's Saturday as I'm filming this. So hopefully I can get back down. It looks a little bit shiny as I try to turn it so that you can see it. Hopefully, I can come back down and do a few of the highlights. We're going to do some real fun edging of the petals, real fun edging of the stalk to really make it stand out the way that this one does. But it's very close here. And when you're doing yours, it's going to feel like it's going to take forever, but truly the next parts are really fun. They go really quick. It could be done here. This could be done. I am going to go ahead and take the stock a little bit over the edge. I just like to do that. I think that that's a pretty little detail. So maybe the studio is just getting darker because the sun is going down. But I think that that gives you a good idea of just setting in the petals, treating them one petal at a time. It really comes together pretty quickly. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, it's a few days later. I'm limping along a little bit with the same palette that I was using last week. Saturday was kind of a rainy, drizzly, dreary, lazy day, so we just enjoyed the weekend. So I'm going to come in and do a few of the final details on this smaller version just to show you sort of how I'm going to approach it. Basically, I'm going to be adding a few of the details into the center of the sunflower. I'm going to be doing a little bit of the bokeh effect in the background, lightening a few of the areas of the petals, and doing some of this really dramatic lighting that is on the piece. Like I mentioned the last time, I will link the reference photo for you. So you'll be able to download that reference photo. It's really a cool photo. You'll be able to download that and use it as you're painting. Trying to decide where I want to start. I think I'll go ahead and start on the yellow. I rinse out my brush just to make sure I don't have any green in it. Um, right now I do have the number 4 Princeton round. I'm going to start with that and see what I think. Um, at this point, our sunflower is pretty well set. It really just needs some highlights. So I'm going to start off with what I know is going to be just a little bit lighter than I want. And I'm just going to come through looking at the reference picture and picking out some of those highlight spots that I really want to amp up a little bit. Don't worry if this is too light because we can always come back in and do a little bit of the Hansa Yellow opaque wash or glaze over the top. So it's easier, not a little bit, it's a lot easier to come back with a glaze over this white to really get these highlights that we're adding in to really pop. So I'll just go around and do a few of these. I'll fast forward through this part and then I probably won't finish them all today. It is kind of late in the day already, but I wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of how we're going to finish this piece. Okay, I think that that looks pretty good for some highlights. Like I mentioned before, we're going to go ahead and glaze over some of that with the Hansa Yellow, but I'm going to let that dry a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and while I have this light color on my brush, I'm going to go ahead and hit some of the edges of the stalk of the sunflower and the leaves with that really interesting highlight. And I think that while I'm at it, I'll probably go ahead and amp up some of these highlight spots. There's a really bright highlight in this one. A little bit of a highlight on the edge. And as you're going around touching some of the edges of the leaves, don't don't think about it like adding a perfect outline. Let it skip around, let it bounce and sort of disappear in a couple of places. That'll make it much more interesting. And it will also give it a little bit of a feel of some of the jagged edges of these leaves. I actually think I'm going to size down to a little bit of a smaller round here. I'm going to pick up the number 1. Is that what that says? 1.0, 10? I don't know what it says. A smaller round. Just going to pick up a smaller one. I'm dipping into I don't have my airbrush medium open, so I'm just going to dip into a little bit of the extender to just thin my paint a little bit. A little bit more paint. Once you set that in, you can get most of the paint out of your brush and then just run your brush along the edge. That just takes away any of the harsh edge of the paint stroke. Lets it settle in a little bit. Let's do some of the edges of the stock. I'm trying to keep my palette out of the camera a little bit just because the white plate really, the camera has a hard time dealing with it. So as I picked up some of that light color, I just rolled my brush in it. That helps to bring back a little bit of that um, sharp point to the round. And like I mentioned a moment ago, I'm not trying to think about perfectly outlining these. I'm letting the paint skip over some areas, touch some areas, be a little bit brighter in some places. The reference photo has a lot of little, the stock kind of has a little bit of a fuzz to it. Sunflowers are really cool like that. I'm not adding that level of detail to this. It's one of those things as an artist, we have to decide how much of that helps our piece and what would maybe take away. So I'm just being choosy about which details I want to put in. I think I'll add a little bit of the highlight down here on the tip of this leaf. And I think I'm going to highlight the top of the edge of the leaf that curls over here. Even though that really doesn't show in the reference photo, I think that that will look really interesting right there. And then on the back side of that leaf as well. Picked up a little tiny hair. This is a small little painting, so all of those little things make a big difference. And like I mentioned before, really manage the amount of paint that's in your brush. If you dip into your palette and it looks like you've just picked up too much paint, then wipe it off. It's easy to get in a little bit of a hurry and not take the time to manage the brush, but it always ends up being more of a battle in the long run. I think that I'll give the edge of this leaf up here some highlight. Maybe a little bit as it comes down here. That's not really in the reference photo, but it might help this leaf stand out a little bit from the stalk there. If you get yours done and you feel like it's too bright, you can always come back into some areas with even a little glaze of yellow to settle it down a little bit. Also warms it, gives it really that feel of the sun shining through. So I'm trying to think if there was anything else. You can spend more time on the leaves. I'll probably be coming back in and adding in a little bit more detail in some of the leaves. But at this point, it's really just little touches, little additions that you can make. As this dries, we will want to take another look at it and make sure that we've got um, all of those highlights set in as much as we want. Sometimes with those highlights, we need to come back in again. I think that again, while I have that light in my brush, I think I'll come in and start to hint at a couple of little things, little seeds happening in the middle of this sunflower. I felt like that was a little too bright, so I dipped into the burnt sienna just to tone the yellow down a little bit. And I'm just going to dot in a couple of little details. Sunflowers can kind of have a little bit of a symmetrical circle within that inner part of the flower. So keeping these in a little bit of a circular shape can help. Now I think I'll go back to the light, add in a couple of really brighter marks. Okay, I think that that gives you a good idea on that. Um, the other thing that I want to do is I'm going to come in and set in some of the shadow areas of the sunflower. And this can really start to pull this whole flower together. I'm going to start with just burnt sienna, I think. Let me bring it in. I just have this pile of burnt sienna that I'm thinning a little bit. I'm using, again, my extender here. You can use the airbrush medium. I just don't have mine open. And I'm going to pick out a couple of shadow places. Again, just looking at the reference. I think I actually want to darken that just a little bit. I'm going to see if I've got any phthalo blue left. That still works. Extender liquid again, twirling my brush just to bring it to a point. And just looking at the reference photo to see where some of these shadow areas are. You can come back. I still have some of this orange that I had mixed up before. So this is the Pyrrole Red, Hansa Yellow Opaque, just a little bit of burnt sienna. You can come into this other little mixture I still have too. And that's a good way to soften some of the edges of those um, shadows that we just put in. I think that that looks really good. I'm going to come into the black, bring it over to my burnt sienna, just so it's not just pure black. Twirl my brush, thinning out my paint. If you're using the fluids, you won't need to thin yours quite as much as I am. And I'm just coming back in and dotting along some of the edges where the darkest shadows are. I just dipped into more of a pure black there. I'm just going to kind of tap around and darken some of those areas. All of these little things that we do, it's up to you how much detail you put into it, but hopefully you can see in just that last few minutes that some of the little details really do a lot for the piece. They don't take too much time, but really have a lot of punch. Yeah, I think that that looks really, really pretty. Um, let's see. I think I'm going to go ahead and switch to a small filbert. This is a number 2. And I'm going to start to pick out some little areas where we're going to do a little bit of a bokeh technique. So I just dipped into this white that I have. It has a little bit of the green just kind of carried over and muddied it, dirtied it. So that's perfect. I do want to make sure, and I really should have the airbrush medium out too, but I want to make sure that this is very thinned out because it will be much more transparent that way. So I'm going to come in, set in a little bit of paint, tap out the brush, get most of the paint out, and then circle around to make a little bit of that highlight that you'll see in the reference photo. I can tap it in a little bit with my finger. And remember that this will change as it dries. This is going to dry down, so don't make a final decision on whether or not you like this until it has an opportunity to dry. And then if you watched the snowy pine cone branch tutorial, this is the exact same process. I'm going to dip into a little bit of the yellow. In the reference photo, you can see kind of some yellowy areas too. Just kind of circling my brush, vary the sizes, get most of the paint out of your brush, circle back in. On mine, what's happening here is I can see it puddling a little bit on the surface. So what I'm doing is just tapping to get a little bit of that liquid out. And just like before, because it's such a small piece, we really have to manage how much paint is in our brush. So once I tap it in, I'm just going around the edges. That just kind of blurs the edges out. Let's see, I think I want to do some that lean a little bit more green. So again, trying to see what paint I have that's still workable here. Let's come up. You can just barely see that one on camera. I hope that you'll be able to see it a little bit better in the final video. But I like that subtlety too. That's really an interesting look. I'm going to let it be dark up there. Let's add a couple down here. I'm trying to remind myself to think about varying the sizes. It's easy to, your right brain takes over a little bit and you make everything the same. many times as I'm teaching classes and filming, I'm saying many of these things to myself as much as I'm saying them to you. Just put a little one up there. This is a little bit more of kind of a blue green. So just varying the colors. I think I want a few more that are yellow. That yellow really does kind of give the feel of some sunshine shining through there. Come back and I'll sort of put this one right up against that initial light one that we did. So you can do as much of that or as little of that as you want. The other thing that you could do is just come back in with just some scumbling of some greenery if you wanted to add in more of a feel of some greenery, little leaves or something happening in the background. I think that the last thing that I'm going to do for this class is come back in with that Hansa yellow that we talked about before. So um, just to go over some of those white highlights that we put in, just dipped into the airbrush medium, thinned it out a little bit. And now I can come back in and set this color right along the edge. I don't have to cover up all of that white that we put in. And you can do this a couple of different times. Hansa yellow, all of the yellows can be very transparent. So once it dries, you might decide you want to come back in and repeat that whole process. Maybe even putting in more of the highlights, more of the white, so that you can glaze over some of the Hansa yellow again. But it's a teeny tiny piece. So, um, if you are selling artists, we have to remember what the price point really can be for some of these little pieces. So, don't spend too much time. I think that that looks good. I'm going to call it done. I hope you can really see I love what's happening here. It really gives that feel of that leaf really turning and gives it some depth. So, I hope that you enjoyed this class. I hope that you love these pieces. Um, on this one, I'm going to be drilling the holes and adding a wire hanger and some bead stoppers on the front. So it'll be a cute little hanger. I think it'll make a wonderful little gift, and hopefully lots of people at my show will love it as much as I do. So I hope that you're subscribed to the channel. I've got a lot more coming. In fact, I'll go ahead and hold these over. I'm planning on painting these little 4x4 strawberries next, and these will also be hangers. I'll be drilling a hole in them and wiring them so that they're cute little hangers. So that video will be on the channel soon. Have fun with this one.